pass it to Bridget. Have you gone?
Bridget has gone. Kara or Kara? I don't think you've gone yet, right?
Hey, I'm Cara Osborne. I am the Partnership Engagement Coordinator at Bladen Smart Start, and I also coordinate the Resilient Bladen Coalition. We've been doing the resilience work here on adverse childhood experiences and trauma since late 2020. We knew that the climate part is always a thing. The North Carolina Partnership for Children put out a great graphic with the four realms of ACEs and the environmental tree and the roots of the tree. It's excellent. I believe Mr. Bob has shared it before with y'all. Um, so we're on the southeastern end of North Carolina. So hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding is right up our alley, and it does feed into other things. And I will mirror what everyone else has said about funding fears going into the new administration. I have to stay neutral because of Smart Start, but I did want to tell Scott, just hey, it's a rural area, but we're not all like that. So please always think of us. But I definitely agree with you. But yeah, we're still trying to figure out how this work's still going to happen over the next 4 years.
Mhm. And I know we had a couple of people join us since then. Um, so I'll just take over popcorning people. Lori, have you gone yet? Lori or Ariane?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I joined late. I, s- I am- I assume we're just introducing ourselves and
Introducing and any concerns or questions you might have about launching a network.
um, so I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm Afghan American. I am a somatic psychotherapist and a social worker and do some coaching and facilitation. And I really want to make use of all these disparate networks. I attended this Food is Medicine conference yesterday, and I could see how sort of weaving in different community organizations that have their own structure towards a common goal would really address all of it together. So I'm a little daunted about taking on something to convene it in this particular way, just because of my time and kind of current situation. I'm so overextended already, but this falls right into just the alignment of everything that I'm interested
Mm.
in.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Ariane.
Mhm.
Uh, Julio or Tej, are either of you able to join us? Ah, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sri Vishnu Tetsaripalli. I'm a Sunway University student in Malaysia. It's actually 1:20 a.m. midnight, very late. But I think what's very important is, just like my background picture, the galaxy, the universe, our globe is itself a round sphere, which means that no matter the time zone, no matter the cultural values and the family backgrounds we all come from, it's very important to get together and unite to talk about different stuff, not just about transformational resilience. I think every person needs to endure resilience and perseverance to have a kind of sense of attitude. So this is a part of my upbringing and learning. So yeah, I mean, sometimes the model which I've learned so far, I think even sometimes no experience is also a good experience. So I may not have started working, but I had experience of doing 5 months of internship at Sunway Lagoon. So I definitely know the working style and how to collaborate with peers. Recently, I've actually been a part of a program called Planetary Health, which took place 6, 7 months ago in April. It was held over here in Malaysia at Sunway Planetary Health, where I collaborated with at least 65 countries. So, these are some of those nostalgic moments and memories I'm able to share. I'm able to give insightful knowledge to all of you here today. And yeah, I think it's my privilege. So, I mean, whatever we do, there's no right or wrong. Your opinion is your opinion. So you have to just stand up on your own feet for what you want to say. Thank you.
And I apologize. I missed the last bit of what you said. I'm having some internet blips. So
Yeah, I mean,
Christian,
I was
please take
just
over for me
mentioning,
if I blip.
yeah, I mean, I was just mentioning, Christy, like, your opinion is your opinion. You own your own firm decisive actions, and your decisions are purely yours. So don't underestimate yourself or put yourself in another person's shoes. So just win up for your dreams and battles. So that's what I have done today. Even though all my family members are asleep, I'm the only one who's awake. So it all depends, I think, about your mentality and time and your positive energy, what brings about the change.
Mhm. Thank you. And where I think we just have a couple more people, and then I'd love to pivot to some of the themes that I'm hearing. Megan, you haven't gone yet, right?
Right. Hello. Nice to be with all of you. So, yeah, I'm Megan Lipset. I use she, her pronouns, and my interest level in starting a resilience coalition is very high. And so I'm a psychologist and co-direct the Center for the Science and Practice of Well-Being at the University of Oregon. And so one of my questions is, Bob, I was kind of getting to know you and your work and saw, oh, hey, I'm seeing that maybe you're still in Eugene. And so I have this kind of like, don't want to step on toes. Maybe it makes sense to get oriented to if there are already things happening here. Um, and then there's actually a second space that I'd like to start another coalition. So in addition to co-directing here, I also chair a master's program of integrative health at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. And I'm interested as well in starting a coalition there. And the questions I have there have more to do with kind of what approach like what is the appropriateness of more non-local communities if they're not as rooted in a neighborhood explicitly. Specifically, I'm thinking about, some of the faculty, but many of us do community-based research or are therapists, psychologists who are working and embedded within communities. So I'm noticing folks who are doing prevention science, which is very aligned for me, and thinking about what it means to engage healthcare practitioners in thinking about how they can take the opportunity of lifestyle prescription to be a moment to engage people more in community activism projects and in climate resilience projects. So it's kind of where my focus is, and just really happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Megan. And yes, Megan and Scott are on Oregon side, so feel free to email us and we can talk further about what's happening on the Oregon end. So I just want to name, and before I turn it over to Bob, some common themes that I am hearing, because I was just taking a couple notes, is like a lot of, and I will say that we've heard these questions even before the election, but I think the election in the United States has heightened this, but a lot of political tension and recognition of harm taking place in our community, or risk of harm as we move into when we think about neighborhood level coalitions in this way, and how we can like bridge and cross those political, like ideologically activating divides. I also resonate with what a couple have said about being stretched thin. I think people who are initially drawn to the idea of TRCNs are already community workers and are drawn to it because they see the need and are probably doing something a little similar, more or less. So recognizing that we often think about time within a scarcity mindset, which can be activating in itself. And I think on the most practical side is the funding and access to funding post-election. Uh, and I'm already hearing a couple people in the same area, but wanting to give love and attention to those who might feel like I'm one of the few in my community trying to, and how do I bring people into this work? So recognizing a need for, I can't be the only one launching this. I'd love a partner or a friend. Um, so Bob, would you like to? I know we already know Bob, but Bob, I'm gonna give you some time if you want to do a formal introduction and any response you might have.
Well, thank you, and nice to see you all here. Yeah, Bob Doppelt, I coordinate the ITRC, and we put together with the Trauma Informed Oregon and the Campaign for Trauma Informed Policy and Practice this Race to Resilience program that we're working on. And just to go back, and Megan, I've retired from the University of Oregon, but I'm still in Eugene part-time and other places, other time working on these issues. So nice to meet you. I guess I just have a few comments, then I'm going to turn it back over to Christie's because we really want to have a discussion. But I think what we're seeing is risks in many, many ways to many people everywhere. There are social risks, there are political risk, there's healthcare risk, and clearly there's climate risk, which I think the stress of all that is just adding more and more. It's just a vicious cycle. And when you really think about it, solidarity is really the only solution in its different forms. That doesn't address yet how we deal with people who oppose helping others and caring for others. We should talk about that. And how do we engage folks? How do we move beyond the polarization we're in today? But we have done this before in the past. I guess I'll just say this a couple of times and then we can get into it to the discussions. At the US at least, and I think many other nations have gone through this kinds of polarization a number of times historically. And we've always made it through with lots of bumps on the road and lots of people who are likely to be harmed, but we have made it through. And it's required a commitment by a whole bunch of people to stay committed to building that solidarity, promoting the values and the purpose we think are really important. So that's my hope that this is not new. We're sad we're going through it, but we have done this. We can do it again, but it's going to take a really committed effort. And at the core of that is going to be to bring people together. Some won't participate. Some will try to undermine it and attack it, but that's going to be the core. There's more details. We can get into that, but I'm going to turn it back over to Christy and we can just start talking about some of this stuff. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bob. And I think it's a good reminder that, history and people, we are all the same people and we cycle for better or for worse. And I'll just bring in just a little bit of spark of hope. For me, I'm trying to work on building relationship just within my condo complex. And I have a next door neighbor who is very much a Trump supporter, very loud, individual of all sorts. And he presents as someone to be afraid of, at least for me as a skinny, scrawny brown person. Uh, and he was the first person to stand up for me when racism occurred in my condo complex. And that's because I had been building relationship with him and he knew me. And he is the first person in my little community who has been interested in composting with me. Now, he wants to do it from a financial and apocalypse standpoint, but nonetheless, he is open to we're sharing a little compost bin right now and moving towards that. So it is interesting to like how we can. So I would love to hear from you because I'm hearing and wanting to hold some of the tension that we feel in initiating and bridging political divides and activating topics and how we can rehumanize people in that process. And for those of you who joined in late, I want you to know that this session today is going to be a really informal discussion, really wanting to crowdsource and do some learning exchanges with us as a group for the common barriers that we're noticing are happening on our ends and how we as a group can identify some solutions and practical actions that we can take for if we wanted to launch a TRCN. So since the main topic that I was hearing reoccurring was that how we can cross those political activating divides, I want to know, does anyone have any other stories or methods that they have taken. I know that I think it was Dixie who mentioned a little bit of talking to that neighbor, but Bridget, go ahead.
I can tell I'm all fired up this morning. Because my
It's good
mind
to
is
wake up
going
spicy.
boom. But yeah, well, and I feel like this time, I hate to say this, but I literally feel like this time is a culmination of my 30 years of experience. And it's nice to see that track for me, honestly, at this point. But there's a couple things, so please bear with me because I'm processing as we talk. One of the things that I'm acutely aware of is what I call future-proofing nonprofits. And that can't be done. Like to Bob's point, we've been in this situation before. So situations do arise. How we respond to them should not be recycled unless they were really effective. And I don't think recycling existing nonprofit behavior is actually going to get us where we want to be. And then I looked at, organizational dynamics are no different than individual dynamics during this election. Polarization, even if it's benign negligence, it is an issue of, we go back to, wait, how can we do this? And I want to collaborate with you, not really sure how to do it. And it's beyond just sharing a program. True collaborative didactic practices are literally a merging of assets, a merging of resources, a letting go of the ego, because I have found that organizations go right into fight, flight, fear, freeze. And then they do, and they're not, because it's people's lives at stake. So our stakes are higher. But that means that the solutions kind of come from that scarcity mentality. And so one of the things that I feel is on the table, and I'm looking at this all the time, and it was Larissa, you said something about the disparate, there's disparate organizations. I heard something else being said here. I think that looking more creatively at different ways of collaborating, like literally different business models, like one organization becomes one. Mergers is one of the top things nonprofit consultants are talking about now. And that actually gave me a pit in my stomach, because I realized, though, that was my ego. That's my wanting to save an organization versus save a mission. And I think we have to really be able to put that out on the table. I'm hearing all this amazing stuff in Oregon, yet everyone's going for the same grants and the same donors and the same. So I don't want us to keep undercutting ourselves as we historically do. I feel really strongly about that. And the other thing is learning that it's not heresy to talk the language of the majority, meaning I am learning to rephrase very rapidly what we do in terms of economics, connection labor. There's a book about that actually that's out, which is amazing, where finally somebody gave an economic argument to why belonging connection is an economic argument. We might go, well, I don't want to go there. But if we don't speak the language of the majority, we're still hurting ourselves. So I think it takes a lot of introspection for us to take a look at very, very changing the paradigms from which we develop solutions. And so, like I said, mergers, looking at it from economics, talking the language, and being okay with that, because longer term, that's going to serve people. And one of the strongest things I've seen in my 3 decades, and then I will shut up, is that I have seen the public, and a report just came out on this, where the public, it was a 9-point differential, that the public thinks in the US that businesses are more competent than nonprofits. Okay, there's a reason for that. And part of that, we have to go, what are we doing to contribute to that? And so that economics argument, like I mentioned, the mergers, the looking at how do you really share resources and get more done with less, I think is going to be the way we have to future-proof ourselves to be able to protect the people that we're serving. And then the other thing is, as many of you may be familiar with this, there's a group called Braver Angels, and this is a classic example. All Braver Angels does is focus on how do you bring red and blue together, like from completely opposites. And so they have a podcast on November 17th, which is how to become politically unfragile. And we don't need to create that dialogue. We can look to their models to do it. So again, it's not, oh, we got to reinvent the wheel. So I just really want to encourage that.
Yeah. So Bridget, you just name dropped a couple great resources. If you could drop them in chat, that would be helpful.
Got it.
And I'll just say that one thing that popped in my head was Sandy Bloom's parallel process, where she talks about trauma organized systems, as you were saying, and how organizations can recreate trauma activation, which really resonated with me. Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. You brought up a lot of good points, and I couldn't agree more with you, having it come from a nonprofit background myself. I'm just thinking back to the community practice series that Bob and Christian that you put on, and one of the first exercises was how to do an elevator speech, right? And I'm just wondering out loud is, do we have, speaking to what Bridget says about speaking to the majorities, do we have the right narrative? And if it's the right narrative, are we unified and coherent and consistent upon it, right? Because, learning from, marketing folks is you have to say it 7 times in 7 different ways before it resonates with people, right? So, we have, as someone mentioned here, a couple of people mentioned, we have disparate networks of RCNs, right? Are we speaking, are we sharing the same messaging points that can be universal, speaking to that majority? Do we have that? And I don't know. I'm not, that's just a question I'm proposing, is thinking out loud.
Scott, that would be an interesting crowdsource. 7 different ways we can introduce and explain what TRCNs are and the benefits of them from very different perspectives, one being economic, one being centering relationship, one being prevention, one being maybe political power and autonomy. I think that would be really compelling. I appreciate that. Yeah. Anyone else have anything else that's coming up or?
Chrissy, I'll add something. This is Bob. We are actually kicking off a study or a research report that we hope to have by early next year on the economic costs of trauma in communities compared to the cost of prevention in communities. It's with an economist, or Ninimi, who I know worked with for years. So because of that very issue, especially we thought about it in terms of dealing with the US Congress, now controlled by Republicans. They're going to be mostly interested in financial issues, economic issues, cost issues. So that's what this is going to be aimed at. But it could provide a model that others can use in their own community, because this will be a global, national kind of look. So just, probably, I'm guessing February, but we'll see. So just wanted you to know about that.
No, and I know that, and Bob, on the ITRC side, I know that we are working on the federal bill for Community Mental Wellness and Resilience Act. I wonder if there's some language there that might be useful for elevator speeches.
Yeah, that's a good point. You might we can send that the bill out and the talking points we have about that. The person who the primary sponsor of the bill, Representative Paul Tonko, has been reelected. He's already told us he's going to reintroduce the bill. In the bill, as whoever it was, Bridget or somebody was saying, there's no talk about climate change. We talk about extreme weather events and stresses, et cetera, et cetera. And we had 3 Republicans co-sponsors, and they've all been reelected. And we're now working with them to find out how to move this forward. They're trying to figure out where their party's going to be anyway. But one other thing I'll say about that discussion, I think following up on Christie's example, we had a bill in the Oregon legislature now, I think 3 sessions ago, to create a study process with a whole bunch of people involved to organize TRCNs. And the person that we had to work through was a hardcore Republican. And I went and talked with him, and it turns out he could care less about climate change, et cetera, thought it was a hoax, but he was a veteran and had seen PSTD among his post-traumatic stress disorder among his friends and family who had participated in there. So we just started talking about how extreme weather events, et cetera, can create PSTD. When we went to the committee to have a hearing, he voted positively. The bill just moved out of committee with a unanimous support of all the Republicans because of his work. But then the legislative session completely died later, so the bill went anywhere. But the point is, we can find ways to what something in common. At least that's one story that could help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm wondering if this group, especially those out of the United States, have any similar stories or recommendations of how they bridge that political divide.
In my context, we we are struggling a little bit with building this bridge because, for example, we had this religious group in Brazil that took the front of an important association of professionals in prevention, and it's really hard to build bridge with them to work together. And they were the only ones that received funds in the last government of Bolsonaro in the country. And I think it will be needed to work with them because they have really big influence in communities because they come from church and they don't know where to educate or to have formation. So it's really hard to see that I didn't want to work with them, but it's something that I can't avoid. And I think they will be really important because when something big happens in the communities about flooding or extremely heat, they are the ones that are working with the people. We can ignore that they are the ones that are working with them. So I'm just planning how to do this and listen to your recommendations. Really, really good. So thank you for this openness, and I hope we have a better history in 6 months or something like this of building some bridges with them.
I apologize, y'all. I think the rain is impacting my internet, which is sad because I'm in Portland area where it always rains. So I missed the last bit, I think, that you said there, so I apologize. Or if Dixie had been speaking since I missed that too. I sorry.
Christy, this is Bob. Let me make one suggestion just based on what I'm hearing. I wonder if everyone who has interest in time could prepare a short talk, elevator speech, key points. How would you communicate with people in your area that you disagree with? And let's share it among each other. Let's post it so everybody can start seeing how everybody else is viewing this. Would that be helpful? And is that something people would be willing to take a look at? Just take 5 or 10 minutes and write that up and send it to us by email and we'll post them.
That sounds great.
And they don't have to be, I think, the best wordsmithed elevator pitches of all time. If anything, it could be like really like key talking points that you feel would really resonate with your community as well.
Yeah.
It's a really great idea, Bob.
Can I share? This is Dixie.
Go for it, Dixie.
Well, I just want to say too, I'm an older person and I've done a lot of community organizing and I was DART trained. And one of the things that we're really put a lot of emphasis on is to find the common ground, never choose a direction or a organizing area that's going to divide people. And so, one of the things I think that helped me with my neighbors is that we all agree that before, during, and after a hurricane, because I live in Florida, it's really good to know who your neighbors are. It's really good to know who left and who's going to stay. And then it's really good to have a system where we can communicate with one another in various ways. And so it was funny because one of my neighbors, the one that I didn't want to knock on her door because of the the sign that was out there, but really those were the common features that we both care about, right? And so, she said to me, well, my friend belongs to a church group and they have a color coding system. And so after a storm, they put something out that says, whether like a color, if it's black, there's someone inside that's injured or dead, like she started sharing with me this very sophisticated way that the Latter-day Saints, the Church of Latter-day Saints, they have a very comprehensive disaster planning process that they use. And so when she's sharing this with me, I'm thinking, wow, like this is genius, the stuff that she's telling me. So I think that's another thing too, is that once we just find the common ground, my experience tells me that we learn a lot from other people. And somebody was talking about ego, and I just want to say that, for those of us who have an ego that needs to be contended with sometimes, it is the biggest thing to put aside, because I can't learn when I'm so busy thinking I know everything. So my neighbors have a lot to tell me, even having a list. So she said, well, maybe we could have a list and we could say, like, who has a generator? Who has somebody in the house with special needs? Who has this? Who has that? Does anybody have a ham radio? Like, she was coming up with all this stuff. And I thought, wow, like, these are very simple things to think about when you're looking at your neighborhood. And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that after an event, we're probably opening our eyes and opening our front door to our neighborhood. And that's who we're going to need to recover with. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you, Dixie. And as someone who grew up Latter-day Saint, and my mom is the local board's emergency response coordinator, I know some of those dynamics, and I'd be happy to chat more about the secrets and the values.
Right, because again, it's not my religious belief, but yeah.
But they're very responsive. They are one of the main communities that will respond to disasters. Like my brother and my dad and so many of our board members went down during Hurricane Katrina very quickly to help with disaster relief side, and they are invested in long-term prevention work. And I know they actually have a resilience class series that my mom mentioned the other day that might be compelling. Cassie? Oh, you're muted still. Just the Zoom bingo.
Sorry. I'm claiming hurricane brain, which is what we're calling it these days. It's I just wanted to respond to what you were saying, Jix, in terms of here after the hurricane, people from all walks of life and all different political, even third-party people who don't vote, all came together. And it's been really nice to see that. It's still going on. People are going out to the rural areas, which are hit much harder. Well, I don't know. They were hit hard and they need more support. And that's still happening, even though they have Trump signs in the yard. I had somebody get a giant tree root out of my yard yesterday, and they were rural people coming into the city to help. I mean, we paid them. I'm just saying it's nice to see that coming together. And that definitely happened around here. And we also created amazing, I got to know lots of neighbors that I didn't know. And we had a wall of information that I think was in the New York Times. It was on some, big outlet around the corner, where everyone put their information about where do you get water? Where can you get food? Who has power?
Yes, practical support. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened so quickly. We got organized. It was wonderful. So I wanted to say all that, but then also in terms of the polarization, I was listening to a podcast yesterday by Climate Psychiatry Alliance, and it's about the election. And Robin Cooper was, one point she made was that we really need to try to not split in terms of seeing the other as an other. And we really recognize that Trump supporters are people too, and that they are coming from a place of high anxiety. The whole world is kind of traumatized right now, even before and that we are all stressed, we are all scared for the future, for our children, and we have different different worldviews that we are, different lenses we're putting on to explain what's happening. And that's why we're voting so radically differently, like we live in two different worlds, which we kind of do. But I found it very helpful in a large spiritual kind of psychological way, maybe, to take that to heart and to try to work with that, because I feel so angry at like my husband's family that voted for Trump. I'm dreading going to see them at Christmas time. But you know what? They're not bad people. They're really not. So I don't know. I just had to throw that in because it helps me theoretically, and I'm hoping it will sink down deeper.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
No,
thank you.
Cassie, you brought up a story that I had, and then we'll pivot because I realize we're almost at the end of time. But I remember when back in, oh my goodness, maybe 2018, during the time that Trump was first elected, my supervisor was telling me a story about how she was on vacation and they were on the beach and that she saw some people with MAGA hats that and she was like, oh, I want to stay away with them. And kind of that typical behavior of like, with beers, really loud music, and like, oh, I want to stay away from them because that's really activating. And then her nephew started drowning. And the first people to run out and rescue her nephew were those people with the MAGA hats. And that really helped her humanize people who are part of that political divide. So we have 10 minutes left, and I will say that we're welcome people to stay beyond the hour. I'm happy to do so and stick around a little longer. But I also want to just give some time for those who do plan to leave at the hour. Um, Maybe just some like the practicalities of what technical assistance do you anticipate needing? Uh, any key resources that you feel you'd really benefit from to help you launch your TRCN in your community. For example, I was already, some people mentioned like I'd really love to know if there are other, um, if there's any current activity in my state. I don't know what we can do on our involved, but I know that lots of people. And I don't know if like we could help connect people. I know definitely North Carolina has a lot of stuff going on. Um, how we can better connect people who have been in past COPs or this current work. The elevator speech, I think would be really compelling as a starting point for launching. But any other like just practical resources, things that you feel you'd really benefit from, aside from the handbook that we will have prepared, that we do have prepared for you, should you want to apply to launch a TRCN?
Well, I'd love to ask if there will be any other short COPs like this, because as I'm communicating with people in my various networks about this and why it's so important, like we have a young women's conference and a lot of the young women live in public housing, and we're thinking, wow, get young people,
Yes.
energized around this, right? So, and then I work with Bethune-Cookman University, and again, they're in a huge flood zone. So as I'm talking to people and they say, wow, can I jump in? Or are they going to be doing it again? I don't know the answer. So I guess that was something I really wanted to ask is, can we direct people that want to take a leadership role and maybe aren't in our immediate ecosystem, but want to influence their own ecosystem?
Bob, I do think there was a plan to do another mini COP or something.
Christy, you cut out. I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I believe there was a plan to have another mini COP in the future. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you're interested in forming a TRNC, a Resilience Coordinating Network in your community, and you just let us know and we'll designate you. We've been sitting on it for just a couple of weeks for a lot of reasons, including the election, but now we'll start the process. We'll designate you as a prospective TRCN, and then we will start holding calls like this, a community practice with everybody who's part of that. And there'll be regular calls. So that's the idea. We want, but then we'll continue to hold a few sort of separate things just to introduce people to the whole concept like we've done. But once you're involved, once you're trying to find people, once you're trying to create the right messages, et cetera, we'll involve you in a community practice with others doing the same thing, basically what we're doing today, and go from there. So let me say one other very quick thing that I saw the proposal of the book, A Paradise Built in Hell, and some other, and hearing the comments on how the neighbors have come together to help in these disasters. That's exactly right. The book, though, Paradise Built in Hell, and I've talked to the author about it, misses a key point that these disasters do bring people together that don't usually know each other, like each other, but then they break apart after it ends. What we need to do now is establish the social infrastructure in communities that sustains that over time. That's what these resilience networks can do. That's the whole point of them. And that's how you can overcome the polarization, et cetera. It takes time. It's going to take work. There's going to be problems, going to be setbacks, but we have to maintain that over time because people do drop their political and social ideologies to help others. Then how do you build on that? I'll stop.
I also think from a political and sociological standpoint, when there are external forces to your country, you know, I think a lot of times getting people to turn against one another is a strategy, and it's very effective. And so the more we can recognize that we feed into that if we turn against one another. And I've started saying that to people because when people want to commiserate about those people, it's like, well, that's what it breeds. It breeds us turning against one another. And I don't think any of us can afford that right now.
Yeah. Well, it's a military tactic when we think about how the Japanese were called Japs during World War II and things like that. How do we like other and dehumanize an entire community so much that we can't empathize with them, we can't relate to them and build community and connection with them? And I think that, and I added Paradise Built in Hell, Bob. And I wanted to add that because I think that there is a very strong honeymoon effect that can occur after extreme weather events and disasters. That I think gives me a lot of hope for that people can, no matter who they are, put aside barriers to come together in community. And there are so many myths around disasters that people are going to rob or loot that has been consistently unfounded. And I think that's why that book is so compelling to me. But what makes the TRCNs different is how do we create those networks before a disaster or even the long-term recovery or cyclical nature of disasters, and how do we maintain that is, I think, the beauty of TRCNs. So Christian and I put in chat a link to the CTEP website for where you can formally apply to form a TRCN. And as Bob said, once we officially have, vet, and I say very loosely vet applications, we'll reach out to those who are interested in launching formally, and we'll convene people together to go step by step through the handbook, and kind of the practical application of this work. But we are just above the hour. Again, if you have time and capacity and want to hang around, you're welcome to. But otherwise, I don't want to keep people. If anyone has other things to do, need to go live life, you're welcome to leave as well. So just want to create some space for that transition.
Thank you.
Bye, Dixie. Thank you, Serena. Bye, Cassie. Bye, Evan and Rachel. Thank y'all for joining. Scott, let's talk later. And Megan, you too. Our fellow Oregonians, we need to talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask one question to you, Christy?
Yes.
There was a document, I'm still having some structural questions around kind of who can be affiliated and, how funding moves through and things like that. And I feel like there was a document that I had at one point that spoke a little bit more to some of the structural conditions for forming. and I haven't been able to find that again, and I'm wondering if you could direct me to it, and maybe that would help me re-ask the question I had when I was reading it.
Do you know if it was like, did it look like an application or was it just a description of TRCNs?
No, it was a description of the TRCNs, and I'm just particularly, I understand that the basic approach here is to have these be community led. But I'm also just curious about sort of, if funding is received, who can receive that? Is that like, are there particular organizations that can or can't be affiliated in certain ways, and kind of what that looks like?
Let me take a shot at that. I don't know what document, but we'll send out a link to a whole bunch of documents that you can read about this. But first of all, there's no one size fits all approach to a resilience network. Each community is going to have to develop their own approach. And that means even their own funding streams and who secures the funding, how do they distribute it. But I think what is important to remember is the difference between community-led and community-based. Community-led means that a network of community members that includes organizational leaders of all kinds and individual grassroots neighborhood leaders, they make the decisions about what the TRCN is going to do, and how they spend the money. They might designate a nonprofit or a government agency or even a private organization to be the fiscal sponsor, so funding can come in through them. But that entity is not the decision-making body. When a community-based initiative is the opposite. It's usually, and what we mean by that is it is a nonprofit or a government or a private entity that gets the money and is ultimately responsible for the decisions that are made with it, because they're responsible to their funders. So they take feedback, they organize groups, et cetera. They take feedback from the residents, et cetera. But they ultimately make the decisions. And generally what we've seen, I think it's pretty unequivocal, when the funding stops because the locals have not felt ownership of it, the initiative stops. Whereas when it's they're the decision makers, when the community is the decision makers, it's community led, even if they don't have funding, the initiative continues on. They might try to find different sources of funding, et cetera. And that's what's really going to be important here. There are many community resilience initiatives that don't get funding at all and go on just fine. Now, they have some volunteer who's willing to spend their time in doing it. So, but it's that funding. And even we've worked with groups in Africa, for example, that the funding has to come through the local chief. And they never get money on the ground in the community. So they let them get whatever, a little bit of money, but then they just go do their thing with the community making the decisions. So, but each community is going to have to decide how to do that on their own, what the best approach is. And also who should participate. I think that's up to the group. And you probably have to start small and go out and say, well, this group is opposed to a lot of things, get a dialogue going with them, et cetera, before they're formally involved, but try to reach out and engage them as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I did find the doc I was looking for. I think this might be old, I'm not sure, and it's Race to Resilience overall. And I think the question was about not be a project or program led by an organization, which I'm sort of hearing and agreeing with the functionality and the philosophy, of course. And I'm just kind of thinking about it from the perspective of like when grants are applied for and when funds are received, there tend to be pre-created agreements with the funders. And so I'm kind of curious, like at what point, that distinction of the community being the decision makers, and also like what kind of agreements can be made with the funders in terms of like there needs to be a report of what has occurred, once a year and all those kinds of things. So I know it like there's just some of that nitty-gritty stuff that I'm curious about, but I think for the time being, it seems like overall receiving of funding is possible. It could be received, for instance, by one of my institutions, but there would need to be agreements from the funders and the institution that the decisions that are made about how those monies are used are made by the community. Does that sound right?
That's correct. You know, there have been universities that have started these programs, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
There's one in New York. But I will say again, as long as they get the funding, they start it, but they are clear that they want a community-led initiative, that they're the decision makers that can work. In the case of the New York program, and it was mostly focused on youth and resilience for disasters, when they're funding led because the university ran it per se, the whole program ended. And people were very disappointed in that. So as long as a nonprofit or a government agency go out and start an initiative and get funding for it, as long as they know that that's what they're trying to do, they're setting up the structure so that the decision making lies with the community group, the network.
Yep. And I will say, for my network of community-based organizations, we've been really fortunate to identify key people in like OCF and United Way, who within those funding structures who are willing to carve out and help us like co-create really accessible funding that had like kind of like open and vague language to help our CBOs really do culturally rooted disaster resilience work. So even thinking about how local funders can be part of this conversation, who are already invested in community, it can be quite compelling.
Yeah. Have you seen group coalitions who have collaborated in some way or themselves done research connected to the initiatives that are happening? And, you know, I'm thinking about, like, of course, there are research funders who are more aligned with community-based participatory research, places like PCORI. I imagine that would kind of be the natural fit, but what have you seen with that?
Yeah, a number of the community-based initiatives around community-led have gotten funding either direct because the university brought it to them, or they went out with a university partner and sought it out to do research on their program. And actually, that's one of the best ways they stay funded, is that way. And also that brings grad students, interns to the initiative that basically serve as staff. And so that's a very effective way, but that has to be carefully managed and be very clear what the roles are and responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. Just as an aside, as an example, the Neighborhood Resilience Initiative, the Neighborhood NEN, Neighborhood Empowerment Program, in San Francisco, which is now sidelined because the city cut the budget. They basically were staffed. They have some staff, but they basically were staffed by university students who did research on the project, et cetera. What they would do, they started off because of earthquakes, building resilience for earthquakes, because it's San Francisco. And then they realized, oh, they had these extreme smoke events from wildfires. Oh, we better deal with everything. So they close off roads in the middle of the city. And have everybody in the high rise bring food down, and they do potlucks to allow the residents to meet each other. Who would ever thought you'd ever meet people from 3 buildings over on the 25th floor, whatever it was. And then after they did that a while, they then formed a resilience network, a coalition of people interested who developed a resilience plan for that area, for that neighborhood. And so that's how they did it. And the universities gave a lot of the resources and time, et cetera, from their students to basically staff it. So it can be very effective.
I may have gone to one of those potlucks in Oakland. I don't know. I went to a fantastic one, and it was very educational and wonderful. So maybe it was them.
I want to give some time to you, Bill, because I know you joined us a little late. Do you have any questions? I'm not sure what you were able to catch up on during this discussion.
I'm just checking in from Spokane, Washington. I've been following your work for a while. And here we have a group of people doing an eco-anxiety cafes that have been going for the past little bit. been really interested in the mental health and social aspects of the work, loosely affiliated with 350. But what's interesting in Spokane right now is there was a volunteer-led program called the Sustainability Action Subcommittee of the City Council over several years, and it created a plan, which then now is being taken over by the city government, the administrative part of the government, to fund it better, and also some university involvement at Gonzaga around climate resiliency. So we're just contemplating what we can do with a network such as what you're doing. So I passed the last COP documents over to people, and we're just talking about it. So we're interested. We're not even ready to be, emergent yet, but it's in alignment with a lot of the things that we've been just beginning to do here. And Spokane is not, in the east side of the state, is not the same as Seattle or Portland or whatever. And I did notice one of the small cities in central Washington, it was listed on one of your documents. I can't remember if it was Walla Walla or.
I think it was Walla Walla.
Yeah. So I want to investigate that. Yeah, I've been part of training for transition towns over the years, and so this is really parallel in a lot of ways to thinking about it, but more focused. So I appreciate that. So there's about 4 or 5 of us that are gathering to see if we want to bring this to the city and like that. One last thing on the funding piece, I think part of our resilience thinking would be how to have multiple sources of income, because in other work I've done around the, shall we call it, the nonprofit industrial complex, knowing that we need to have multiple streams of resources, not just money, to be really resilient over time. So that's just where we are here, and been very interested in watching this evolve over the last several months. So you'll see more of us. And does anybody have connections to that Walla Walla group or
Yes,
initiative?
very much so.
Yeah, they're a core member of our national steering committee, and if you send me or Christy an email, we will connect you with those folks out there. Becky Turner's their community organizer, and their founder is a longtime friend, but now is sort of semi-retired. So new staff, but they do great work.
That's really great. One last piece is I think there's a really good connection to local businesses, sustainability businesses in town, but also there's a commercial developer that does the real estate, and they've done a community farm as a park as part of their planned community. And they're really interested in providing resiliency for their folks, the folks who are in those places. So anyway, we're looking at a bunch of different pieces here. So thanks.
Let me say one other quick thing, Christy, and then we probably need to go. But and this for Larissa also, the more that universities can get and research can get involved, they can bring resources to the table that the local initiatives may not be able to get initially. And again, funding, but also students, grad students. So just keep that in mind. It might be a different, most of the local groups don't think about it initially. So it might take that the universities reaching out and offering that. But to do, it's got to be sort of hands-on practical research, helping them figure out how to improve what they're doing, et cetera. They're not so much interested in sort of esoteric research like I used to do at the university. So just keep that in mind, that the more we can help the researchers of the world to engage in these initiatives, but bring resources to help so they gain something and the initiatives gain something, that can be very helpful.
I have just shared here an initiative that started in Brasilia with the university. But today I have approached them to do an interview, and the lead told me, we are just going to work with academics
Right.
if we have something, because we are really tired of the last 2 years that they come here, they watch what we are doing, they learn with us, and then they go and they didn't leave anything. So this was just what happened in this morning when I tried to upload Coletivo Aroeira, that it's these groups of, they are doing those small places of gardening and food in the middle of urban centers. And she just told me this, yeah, we can do the interview, but what you are going to offer, because in the last 2 years, everybody come here, use what they want, and then they go and left us with nothing. So it was the both sides just today. So thank you for sharing this. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us. I know that this is we try to make it global, but it is naturally predominantly United States. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you long term.
I hope so. I will bring back the information to the ICAPs, to our coalition. I'll put the website here, but I know Bob know it. And I told Elena and Brenda that work with us that I will try to join today, and I will try to find if some of my partners can come to you and can discuss, and we can try to do the next together. Thank you.
Yeah. And Larissa, if it would be helpful to schedule another meeting with just us and your partners, if they have any additional questions or whatever that might be, we're happy to do that as well.
Thank you. I'll tell them. Pleasure. Thank you. I wrote to
Awesome.
you later, Christy. I understand that if I wrote to the email, the center email, it gets to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob manages that, or Peg does. So
Okay.
one of us will see it. Yeah.
I mess it up and Peg manages it. So
Exactly. I wasn't gonna say
Okay.
anything, Bob. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for sticking around and lingering. It's nice to talk to people a bit more intimately. But we hope to, again, if you have any additional questions, we're welcome to that. And otherwise, we'd love to keep working with y'all further as you move on.
thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Good to
all.
see you
We'll
all.
see you around.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.